Imagine you are an archivist. You work in a great library, let's say the Tower of Ecthelion in what was once Minas Tirith, now simply called Minas Tirith in the Fourth Age of Middle-earth. Your job is to read the old records, conquest reports, battle rosters, diplomatic correspondence, the kind of paperwork that empires generate when they are trying to understand what just happened to them. And one morning, you pull out a document dated year 3019 of the Third Age, March 25th, to be specific, and you read the following. The Dark Lord is destroyed. The ring is unmade. The armies of Mordor are in retreat. And then, and this is the part that stops you, there is a second page. And a third. And eventually you realize the archivist before you filled an entire shelf with documents dated after that sentence. Because the sentence everyone thinks is the ending, it wasn't. Tonight we are going to read those extra pages together. We need to start at the exact second that sentence becomes true, because that second is stranger and more violent than almost anyone remembers. The year is 3019. The month is March. The date is the 25th. The location: a narrow ledge above a lake of magma, deep inside Aradruin, the Mountain of Doom, Amon Amarth, the forge where the ring was made. Two figures stand there. One of them, Frodo Baggins, a hobbit from a quiet farming county in the northwest of the world, has just done something that changes everything. He has refused. After 6 months of walking across the worst landscape in Middle-earth, after losing 2 fingers, after being stung by a giant spider, stripped naked in an orc tower, and carrying on his neck a piece of jewelry that is psychologically equivalent to having a second Dark Lord whispering directly into your brain. After all of that, Frodo Baggins stands at the only place in the world where the ring can be destroyed. And he says, "The ring is mine." Hold that image for a moment, because this is the actual climax of The Lord of the Rings. Not a hero triumphant, a hero who failed at the final step. Tolkien wrote this on purpose. He spent 3 volumes building toward a moment of triumph, then replaced it with something more honest. A person who tried as hard as any person could try, and still wasn't enough. Alone. The burden too heavy. The fire too close. And then, because Tolkien understood something about how the world actually works, someone else finishes it. Gollum. Smeagol. The creature Bilbo found in the Misty Mountains 60 years before. The thing that Gandalf told Frodo to pity, even though pity felt like foolishness. The wretched, broken, obsessive, completely destroyed little being who had been following them for the entire journey. He bites off Frodo's finger, gets the ring, and in his moment of absolute triumph, dances on the very edge of the ledge. For 1 heartbeat, then he falls. And the ring, gold, perfect, beautiful, catastrophically dangerous, follows him into the fire. Now watch what happens next. From the outside, it looks like this. The sky over Mordor tears open. The Great Eye, that pillar of fire that Sauron had been projecting from the top of Barad-dûr, his tower, his seat of power, turns. And not toward the armies at the Black Gate. It turns inward, toward the mountain, with what the text describes as something between bewilderment and terror. The Dark Lord, who has been playing a 3,000-year chess game with every piece on the board, realizes in that moment what the move was. The pawns. 2 hobbits. 1 broken creature. A finger. A ledge. He had not modeled this. He could not have. Because the One Ring was not simply a weapon. It was Sauron's externalized will, his capacity for thought and dominion and strategy poured into physical form. To destroy, it was not to take something away from him. It was to take him away from him. His spirit survives. Tolkien is careful and important here. Sauron is not killed in the conventional sense. But his spirit survives the way a fire survives after every log, every coal, every scrap of fuel has been removed from under it. It exists, cannot warm anything, cannot burn anything. It simply is, a formless malice that cannot shape itself into hands, or voice, or policy, or war. Present. Finished. And on the plains of Gorgoroth, 50,000 soldiers feel this simultaneously. Not as news, not as an announcement, as a physical severing, as if a hand had been pressing down on the back of every neck, and suddenly it was gone. The orc captains had been getting instructions from somewhere. Now there is nowhere. The soldiers who had been marching on borrowed terror suddenly have none left to borrow. They stop. They scatter. Some of them simply sit down on the battlefield and appear to be waiting for further instructions that will never come. At the Black Gate, where Aragorn and the last few thousand soldiers of the West have been waiting to die, they are not waiting to die anymore. The tide has reversed. One of the most outnumbered last stands in the history of Middle-earth is going to survive. Not because it won the battle, because the battle found something more important to do than finish them. Now, here is where we move from the dramatic to the political. Because a Dark Lord falling is one event. What comes after is 10,000 events, running simultaneously across the entire map. Let's start with the most visible, Barad-dûr. The Dark Tower does not simply collapse. Buildings collapse. Empires collapse. What happens to Barad-dûr is different, and the difference matters. When Sauron rebuilt that tower in the Second Age, he laid the foundations with the power of the One Ring. Not built with ring-funded labor, not constructed using ring-enhanced engineering, the stones themselves were held in place by Sauron's will as channeled through the ring. The ring was load-bearing in a literal, physical sense. So when the ring is destroyed, gravity is owed a debt it has been waiting 3,000 years to collect. The tower does not fall because it was attacked. It falls because the ontological condition that made it a tower rather than a pile of rubble ceases to exist. Every stone remembers what it would weigh without the magic holding it. And then it weighs that much again. This matters politically because Barad-dûr was not just Sauron's home. It was the organizing principle of Eastern Middle-earth, the axis around which every political system east and south of the Anduin had arranged itself for generations. Trade routes existed because of it. Alliances formed around it. Wars were fought to avoid it. When that axis disappears overnight, not loses a battle, not retreats, not is replaced, the entire political map explodes. There are no Nazgûl left to impose order. No clear succession. No emergency protocols. There are only warlords, priesthoods, tribute systems, and terrified populations who have spent their entire lives inside a power structure that evaporated on a Tuesday afternoon. What happens in Harad after the eye goes out? What happens in Run, in Kund, in the Eastern kingdoms that owed Sauron allegiance? Tolkien doesn't tell us. And that silence is his answer. Those cultures are in free fall. Whether they land somewhere better depends entirely on choices that individual people, none of them heroes, none of them ring-bearers, make in the weeks and years that follow. Let's talk about the Nazgûl because there's a common misunderstanding about what happens to them. They are not scattered. They are not driven off. They are not imprisoned somewhere, waiting for another Dark Lord. They are unmade. The 9 ringwraiths, 9 kings of men who accepted rings of power from Sauron thousands of years ago, who were slowly stretched across the centuries into immortal wraiths, who served as his enforcement mechanism, his terror weapon, his air force and cavalry. They are consumed in the same fire that consumed the ring that made them. This is not metaphorical. Their rings, which were always under the dominion of the One, die with it. And without those rings, there is nothing holding the Nazgûl in the form they had. They come apart, gone. This matters because of what the Nazgûl actually were in political terms. Sauron's governance mechanism. Not soldiers, exactly. Administrators of fear. Their presence, the mere knowledge that they existed, that they could appear anywhere, that there was no negotiating with them, was the thing that kept whole regions in line without requiring constant military presence. Every village, every border town, every petty king who paid tribute because they remembered what happened to those who didn't, they had been operating under the ambient threat of those 9 figures for their entire lives. That threat is gone. And here is the uncomfortable implication. In some regions, that ambient threat was the only thing keeping rival factions from each other's throats. Remove it and you don't automatically get peace. You get a competition for what fills the void. Not all of those competitors are benevolent. Now we need to talk about something that happens in complete silence. No battle, no eruption, no visible sign. 3 rings of power begin to fail. Narya, the ring of fire. Nenya, the ring of water. Vilya, the ring of air. The 3. These rings were not made by Sauron. Celebrimbor, the greatest elven smith of the Second Age, forged them alone, in secret, specifically so that Sauron's hand would never touch them. For 3,000 years, this distinction has been their salvation. The 3 were not corrupted, not turned to instruments of domination. They were rings of preservation, healing, protection, wielded by the wisest guardians against the long entropy of the world. But here is the thing about magical architecture. It tends to be connected. Sauron bound his one ring to the same system that made all the rings of power possible. He put it on, and he reached through it toward the three, and though the elves felt him and pulled away before he could corrupt them, the connection was still established. The three were always, in a deep structural sense, downstream of the one, which means when the one is destroyed, they don't retain their charge. They lose it, not explosively, like a lamp running out of oil. The light doesn't go out in a single moment. It just gradually becomes dimmer than you expected. And then dimmer than that. What were these rings actually doing? Let's take them one at a time. Nenya, worn by Galadriel in Lothlorien. The Ring of Water was keeping that forest outside of time. When the Fellowship walks into Lothlorien in the story, they describe the sensation of time feeling different there. Of the leaves staying gold past any natural season. Of the air being clean in a way they cannot name. Of the sense that this place exists in a slightly different calendar than the rest of Middle-earth. That is not the natural magic of a beautiful forest. That is Nenya, working every moment, for thousands of years, actively suspending the normal rules. Vilya, worn by Elrond in Rivendell. The Ring of Air was maintaining the healing quality of Imladris. When Frodo recovers from the Morgul wound there, faster than he should. When the broken sword of Narsil rests on a pedestal and somehow doesn't feel like merely an old broken sword. When the weight of the long war against Sauron doesn't press quite as hard as it does everywhere else. That is Vilya. Narya, worn by Gandalf. The Ring of Fire was not preserving a place at all. It was preserving will. Tolkien says explicitly that Narya's power is to kindle courage against despair. To find the small fires in people and make them last longer than they should. How many councils held together that should have broken? How many last stands found resolve from somewhere they couldn't name? How much of the resistance to Sauron ran invisibly on the quiet infrastructure of that ring? When the one ring is destroyed, all three of those things start to fail. Not because anything went wrong. Not because anyone made a mistake. Because the destruction of the one was the only way to save the world. And saving the world cost Lothlorien its timelessness, Rivendell its sanctuary quality, and Middle-earth the invisible backbone of its resistance. This is what Tolkien means when he says the Third Age ends in victory and in sorrow. He is not being poetic. He is being precise. Follow the political chain forward. The ring is gone. Sauron is broken. Mordor is in chaos. And Aragorn, son of Arathorn, descendant of Isildur, heir to the thrones of both Gondor and Arnor, the man who has been waiting for this moment his entire life, faces the first real test of what kind of king he intends to be. The test is mercy. The surviving armies of Mordor, the men of Harad and Run who did not scatter in pure panic, the soldiers who marched under Sauron's banner but who, in many cases, had little meaningful choice about it, are at the mercy of Aragorn's army. Broken, without a commander, without a mission, Aragorn offers terms. He grants the captains of the defeated forces their freedom. He gives them the right to return to their own lands. He does not pursue, does not exact reparations, does not make an example. This seems, if you are reading quickly, like generosity. It is something more precise than that. Aragorn understood, and Tolkien understood having lived through a world war, that the seeds of the next catastrophe are sown in the treatment of the defeated. The First World War produced the Treaty of Versailles, which produced a generation of humiliation, which produced conditions for something far worse. Tolkien had seen this with his own eyes. Crush the men of the East and South into permanent defeat, treat them as irredeemable extensions of Sauron's darkness, strip them of dignity and future, and you guarantee that in 50 years or 100, when some new ambitious power rises in that region, there will be a population with nothing left to lose and generations of grievance to fuel them. Give them a chance to stop being Sauron's soldiers, and you give them a chance to become something else. There is no song written about Aragorn's pardon of the Haradrim. There is no chapter celebrating it. But it is arguably the most consequential single decision of his entire reign, because every subsequent choice builds on it. Now let's look at the actual map. Gondor stands. Barely. Centuries of Sauron's grinding pressure have left it a shadow, depopulated provinces, ruined fortresses, a steward tradition that mastered survival but never achieved renewal. Minas Tirith still stands because its walls held, but the interior is scar tissue over old wounds. What Aragorn does next is not simply accept a crown and enjoy it. He reopens Osgiliath, the ruined capital that had been a no-man's land for generations. He rebuilds Pelargir. He plants Faramir, the scholar soldier, the man who understood the old things, in Ithilien as prince, tasked with restoring a land that Sauron had deliberately turned into wasteland. And then, and this is the move that changes everything, he reunites Gondor with Arnor. Most people, unless they have spent real time with Tolkien's appendices, think of Arnor as a historical footnote. The Northern Kingdom, broken long ago, its capital a ruin, its royal lineage surviving only in the wandering rangers of the north. Men nobody respects, whose king nobody knows exists. Aragorn knows. When he becomes King Elisar of Gondor, he simultaneously becomes the restored king of Arnor. He refounds the North Kingdom. He reestablishes Anúminas on the shores of Lake Evendim. He draws the scattered rangers, his people who have spent their entire lives protecting a world that doesn't know their name, back into a coherent people with a home. This is not symbolic. This is the healing of a fracture that has defined the weakness of men for 3,000 years. The reason men kept losing to Sauron across the ages was, in part, this: they could never quite hold together. The split realm could never muster unified will. Aragorn's answer is to hold together by being both kings at once. The map rearranges itself around this. New roads, new watchtowers, new borders, new diplomatic channels with the peoples who were Sauron's conscripts and are now, carefully, cautiously, something like neighbors. What replaces the totalizing domination of the One Ring is something harder and less dramatic: distributed, negotiated, human-scale authority. Kingdoms in relationship to each other rather than in subjugation to a single will. That is not more comfortable. It is, in many ways, harder. Politics is harder than obedience. But it is free. Back to the forest. Because we need to talk about what happens to Lothlorien. The Golden Wood, before the Ring's destruction, was not simply a beautiful forest. It was a place where time had been formally suspended. The Fellowship sleeps for one night there and loses track of whether days or weeks have passed. The leaves stay gold past any natural season. Decay is held at the border. Sauron's "I cannot fully penetrate it." That quality was Nenya, Galadriel holding the laws of entropy at arm's length for 3,000 years. When Nenya fails, Lothlorien does not explode. It does not become a dead forest overnight. The Maulorns don't shed their leaves in a single afternoon. What happens is more subtle. The wood begins to live on ordinary time. The gold stays gold for a while, but it will turn, eventually. The borders, which once felt like stepping into a different reality, begin to feel like the edge of a forest. The sense of being preserved from the age gone. Lothlorien becomes a beautiful place that is getting older. For the Galadrim, the people who lived there, this is a specific and particular grief. They have not merely lost a home. They have lost the version of the world in which their home was possible. The enchantment was not decoration. It was the means of survival. Galadriel knows this, which is why she doesn't cling. She doesn't pretend the wood can be maintained by effort of will once the ring that sustained it is gone. She sails west, and in doing so, she performs the act that is very hard to do and very important. She accepts the ending of something she loved, instead of holding it in place past its time. The world she built cannot continue, so she lets it end. And she goes. Rivendell, same story, different character. When Vilya fails, the threshold closes. The deep sustaining quality of Imladris, the sense that in this valley time is a friend, that healing happens faster than it should, that the weight of ages is lighter here, that ebbs away. Rivendell becomes a beautiful valley with excellent stonework and immortal elves who remember every song. But the thing that made it Rivendell rather than simply a very nice place in a valley, that is gone. And Gandalf, Narya failing is the signal that his work is complete. He was sent to Middle-earth as a guardian, a counselor, a Maya in the form of an old man with a cart full of fireworks. His power was always limited by design. He was not permitted to match Sauron's domination with domination, to solve the problem by becoming a version of the problem. Narya gave him something more subtle, the capacity to keep courage alive in others, to tend small fires, to turn up in the Shire and set off fireworks and convince a comfortable hobbit to go on an adventure, or to speak at councils and make people believe resistance was possible when the evidence suggested otherwise. When the ring is destroyed, that work is done. The age is ending. There is nothing left for a guardian angel in an old man's body to protect. So he goes. Not reluctantly, not tragically, with completion. Here is where Tolkien breaks the contract of the fantasy genre. We have been told, for 3 volumes, that the Shire is the thing worth protecting. The innocent, ordinary world that gives the heroism meaning. When Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo finally walk back through the borders, every story instinct says, this part is safe. They're home. Tolkien says, not quite yet. What they find is Sharky's occupation. And Sharky, Saruman, reduced to a bitter, spiteful shell, has done to the Shire in miniature what Sauron did to Mordor in maximum. He has imposed control through rules, informers, small bureaucracies, and the dull machinery of petty power. He has cut down the trees. He has built ugly utilitarian structures where beautiful ones stood. He has turned the most comfortable, cheerful, self-satisfied little country in Middle-earth into a place of misery, not through great evil, but through small evil applied consistently over time. Tolkien lived through industrialization. He watched the English countryside be carved up and made efficient. He watched the villages he loved become gray. He believed, with the conviction of someone who had also survived the Somme, that evil does not only arrive on horseback. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork. The scouring of the Shire is not an epilogue. It is the argument of the entire book made local. The ring is gone. Sauron is broken. And there is still a small, petty tyrant in your backyard, using the memory of fear to make everyone miserable. You have to deal with that too. You don't get to retire into peace because the big war ended. For hobbits come home. The Shire does not recognize them. It sees 4 small people it expected to have died somewhere outside its borders. What it gets is a knight of Rohan, a guard of the citadel of Minas Tirith, the ring-bearer of the Age, and a gardener who walked to the edge of Mordor and came back. Merry and Pippin assess the situation the way officers assess a field. They begin organizing resistance. They call the Shire to arms. They show the hobbits who have been waiting for someone to show them it was possible, that resistance is possible. The Battle of Bywater is small. By any comparison to what these 4 have seen, it is tiny. But it is theirs. It is personal in a way that the Pelennor Fields could never quite be. And when Saruman is finally cornered, when everyone expects the killing stroke, the ending that this kind of story demands, Frodo forbids it. He offers Saruman the chance to leave. Freely. With his life. He refuses to let the liberation of the Shire be stained by execution. He has looked into the heart of Sauron's country, and he will not import Sauron's methods into his own. The mercy is refused. Saruman, by his own hand, is finished anyway. But the offer was real. That is what carrying the ring and surviving it does to a person. It makes them unable to choose cruelty when they don't have to. And then there is Samwise Gamgee, who takes a small box of earth from Galadriel's garden. A gift so understated it almost disappears in the grandeur of everything else she gave the Fellowship, and uses it to heal the Shire. Every tree Sharky cut down, every garden trampled, every lane scarred by the small, ugly machinery of petty tyranny. Sam walks them, distributing that soil, planting where there was ruin. In spring, the Shire blooms. The party tree's replacement is the finest Malorn tree west of the mountains. This is not magic as spectacle. This is magic as labor and love made visible, the remnant power of Lothlorien, channeled through a gardener who knew what it was for. Sam marries Rosie Cotton. He fills Bag End with children. He becomes mayor again and again because he is genuinely very good at it. He takes all the grief and darkness of what he saw and walked through, and converts it into the most ordinary and essential kind of goodness, showing up every day and making things grow. Tolkien, the man who lost nearly every friend he had at the Somme and spent the rest of his life thinking about what it means to come home, understood something that clean happily ever afters miss. The real victory is not the moment the Dark Lord falls. The real victory is a man planting a tree in the ruins of what the Dark Lord did, trusting that something beautiful will grow there. But Sam's healing is not available to everyone. Frodo comes home. He sits in Bag End. He can hear the sounds of the Shire being itself, children laughing, the pub at the bottom of the hill, the smell of pipe smoke and good cooking. He cannot quite get there. October 6th, every year Weathertop. The Morgul Blade. The wound reopens. March 13th, Shelob's Lair. The weight returns. March 25th, the Crack of Doom. The darkness. These are not memories in the ordinary sense. They are wounds that open on a schedule, as if Sauron left timers inside him when he left. The ring is gone. The enemy is broken. The world is at peace. And Frodo Baggins cannot fully inhabit the peace he created. This is Tolkien being ruthless with his own mythology. He will not let the story lie about what it costs. He will not give us a Frodo who healed and found ordinary happiness and grew old and told his grandchildren about it. He gives us a Frodo who tried his absolute best, who succeeded and failed at the same moment, who is, in some deep part of himself, still on that ledge above the fire. Some wounds will not close in Middle-earth, not because Middle-earth failed him, but because some things can only be healed somewhere else. The Undying Lands are not paradise in the sense of a reward. They are a place where the light of creation is still present in a form that Middle-earth no longer has access to, a light that predates the darkening of the world. It exists in the West, not here. And Tolkien's mercy for Frodo is this. There is a shore that can help with this kind of wound, even in a mortal. There is something in the West that can give him rest, not immortality. Mortals who sail there do not become immortal. They go to be at peace for the rest of their natural lives, in a place where the thing that hurt them has no power. Frodo is not ascending. He is not receiving a prize. He is being given the chance to put down a burden that he literally cannot set down while he is still inside the world where he picked it up. Look at who is on that ship with him. Bilbo, the first ring-bearer of the Shire, worn down by long possession, thin as old paper. Gandalf, bearer of Narya, whose work is finished and whose age is over. Elrond, bearer of Vilya, for whom Middle-earth without his ring is already a different world. Galadriel, bearing Nenya for the last time, leaving Middle-earth to the age she cannot live in. Every passenger on that ship is someone whose relationship to the old world has ended. The ring-bearers, the ring-keepers, the last witnesses of the elder days. Frodo belongs with them, a mortal among immortals, a hobbit among ancient powers, but belonging completely, genuinely to this departure. He belongs with the ones who carried too much to simply put it down and go to the pub. The Grey Havens is a harbor on the western coast of Middle-earth. At the end of the Third Age, it is where the last ships depart. It is quiet when they arrive. No ceremony, no crowds, just the sound of the sea and a white ship and the people who are leaving. Sam didn't know until the last moment that Frodo was going. He has had no time to prepare for the grief. And here is where Tolkien does something so quiet and so devastating that you can miss it if you are not paying attention. Sam, who has done everything right, who has been loyal past any reasonable expectation of loyalty, who has become exactly the person the Shire needed, exactly the person Middle-earth produced, cannot follow. Not yet. Tolkien gives Sam a grace. He too, eventually, will sail. As the last surviving ring-bearer, he will one day take a ship west. But that is decades away. Right now he is standing on a dock watching his best friend leave for a place he cannot go. The ship moves. The sail fills with wind. And the Third Age ends. Not with a battle. Not with a proclamation. With a ship pulling away from a dock, carrying the last of the old light out of the world. And then the world keeps going. This is, perhaps, Tolkien's most important and least comfortable point. The ring is gone. Sauron is broken. The Nazgul are unmade. The Three Rings have failed. The Elves are leaving. Gandalf is gone. And Middle-earth, every kingdom, every village, every ordinary person who got up this morning and had breakfast, wakes up in a world without a single cosmic guardian left on the premises. The age of men has arrived. Not the age of great powers. Not the age of wise counselors and ancient lights. The age of men, imperfect, mortal, willful people making decisions in a world that no longer has a Gandalf to correct the major errors. No Nazgul to point at and say, that is the problem. Just people. Making choices. With the full capacity for both extraordinary goodness and ordinary corruption. In a world where evil wears a recognizable face instead of 9 black riders on nightmare horses. Aragorn's reign is long and good by every measure Tolkien gives us. But even in the appendices, there is a quality of something beautiful settling into the past. His kingdom is the last great work of the old blood. After him, the Númenórean legacy dilutes. The kings after him will be lesser. The memory of the ring and the war will become history, then legend, then myth. And the corruptions that come after, the petty tyrants, the bad kings, the ambitions that carve up old alliances, will not be served by a supernatural sponsor. They will be served by the same ordinary human appetites that have always driven bad governance everywhere. Tolkien, the Catholic, did not believe that original sin ended with the destruction of the ring. He believed it just stopped having a supernatural sponsor. Let's return, at the end, to the question we haven't asked yet. How did it work? Not the mechanics, we know those. The ring fell, the fire destroyed it, Sauron's ruin followed. But how did it work in the deeper sense? How did a plan that depended on the willpower of a single hobbit survive the moment that hobbit failed? Tolkien's answer is one of the most sophisticated moves in the history of fantasy literature. Frodo's mercy, and Bilbo's mercy before him, was not a guarantee. Not a strategy. Not a calculated decision made by someone who knew it would pay off. It was simply the right thing to do, done out of pity for a creature who was beyond conventional pity. Gandalf said it to Frodo at Bag End. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. Frodo heard this, and when the moment came, he did not kill Gollum. And Gollum, driven by an obsession that could not be stopped by any force in the world, not armies, not reason, not the wisdom of every wise being in Middle-earth, walked himself directly into position to accidentally complete the quest. No one planned this. No council drew it up. No prophecy foresaw it in this precise form. Tolkien called it something close to grace, the way that moral choices made in the right spirit without expectation of reward can become the threads that hold a larger tapestry together in ways the person making the choice could never see. Sauron could not understand mercy. He understood power, fear, domination, and the logical extension of every strategy. He could not model pity. He could not imagine that the two most unlikely beings in the history of Middle-earth, a comfortable old hobbit in the Shire and a ruined wraith creature in the Misty Mountains, would form the chain of events that would destroy him. The ring was not destroyed by heroism. It was destroyed by the compounded consequences of people choosing, twice, not to kill something pitiful when they could have. That is a different kind of heroism than the kind the films taught us. But it is the heroism Tolkien believed in. We have now traced the full arc. The ring falls. Sauron breaks. The Nazgul are unmade. Mordor implodes. The armies scatter. Aragorn is crowned. Gondor and Arnor are reunited. Peace is offered to former enemies. The 3 rings fail. Lothlorien fades. Rivendell empties. Gandalf sails. The Shire is scoured and rebuilt. Frodo leaves. Sam comes home. None of this happened fast. None of it happened cleanly. None of it resolved into a world that is simply better in every way. What it resolved into is a world that is free to be better or worse, based on the choices of the people living in it. Without a dark lord tipping the scales. Without an obvious enemy. Without the comfort of knowing at least what you were fighting against. The 4th Age is harder than the 3rd in precisely this way. The 3rd Age had Sauron. You knew what you were fighting. You knew what losing looked like. The lines were drawn for you. The 4th Age has only people. And people are the most complicated thing there is. Aragorn's restraint. Frodo's wound. Sam's garden. The elves' departure. These are not side effects of the victory. These are the victory, complete with everything it costs, everything it changes, and everything it makes possible. There are 6 words at the end of The Lord of the Rings. "Well, I'm back," he said. Samwise Gamgee, at his front door, after watching his best friend sail away, after the war, after Mordor, after the Scouring, after all of it, he goes inside. Tolkien does not give us anything after that. No summary, no authorial voice, no reassurance. Just a man, at his door, choosing to re-enter his ordinary life. This is not resignation. It is not defeat. It is not settling. It is the most radical thing any survivor of any great darkness can do. It is choosing the ordinary world on purpose with full knowledge of what you've seen, what you've lost, and what will never be the same. It is the acknowledgement that heroism doesn't end when the Dark Lord falls. It continues in smaller, less cinematic, more essential ways. Every day you get up and choose to build something instead of mourning everything. Tolkien fought in the most catastrophic war the world had yet seen. He lost nearly everyone he loved in it. He came home. He had children. He wrote books. He planted seeds in the ruins of what the world had been. He was Sam. And the whole of Middle-earth, from the crack of doom to the Grey Havens, from Aragorn's coronation to Lothlorien's fading, from Frodo's wound to Galadriel's departure, was his way of saying, I know what this costs. I know what gets lost. I know what doesn't come back. And I know why you go inside anyway.